Hi everyone, it's Anya. Today I have a treat for you. I interviewed Penny Kelly, a very interesting woman. Her website is called consciousnessonfire.com. And Penny had a Kundalini awakening 40 or so years ago and has been fully conscious since then. And so she talks a little bit about what that actually means. For example, she didn't sleep for 3 years after the awakening. And she shares that being fully conscious is maybe not such a blessing as many might think. And shortly after she had this awakening, she also received visitations from little men in robes. And she also wrote a book about this where she shares her story. This looks like this, The Robes, Penny Kelly, which you can get on her website. And these little men in robes took her to the future as far as 2413, I think she said. And also to our time now, which was the future back then. This all happened in the 80s. So she has a lot to share about the rocky times right now, 2018, 19 until 2025, I believe. My reason to talk with her was mainly to talk with her about cryptocurrencies, because I had watched many interviews with her on YouTube, and I'm going to link to a few in the description below. And in one of them, she had mentioned that she had bought Bitcoin just in a side sentence. And I thought, oh, someone who has been to the future buys Bitcoin. I'm sure she knows a little more than the average person about cryptocurrency. So I was really interested in hearing her view and thoughts on cryptocurrencies and the changes that our world and humanity is going through and about to go through. So I think I'm going to post 2 versions of this video because, of course, we went into all sorts of directions and spoke about many different consciousness-related things. Yeah, so I'm going to make a small one just on cryptocurrencies, and then I'm also going to post the full version here. I hope you enjoy this. I certainly did.
Yeah.
So, but today, actually, we want to talk about money, or I want to talk about money with you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Very good.
And the future of money, and whether this could be cryptocurrencies or not. So this is the main subject of our chat today, but I know we will go off in many different directions. So help me to keep this interview on track.
Okay. Okay, we'll do our best.
And yeah, I'm really interested in the evolution of money and the future of money. And since you are someone who has been to the future or has seen the future, I'm so curious what you have seen and what you can share with us. But maybe we should start by giving maybe just a few bullet points of how you became super conscious. What started this and what it means to be fully conscious.
Okay. Oh, now that is a question.
I know, because I heard you say that it's actually not such a blessing. And I know that many people want to become more conscious.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, start there.
So let me just say that if you want to become more conscious, you can't be the way you were yesterday or the day before. And people just want to glom on to how they already are, but have this extra thing called, you know, consciousness or super consciousness or expanded awareness or whatever. And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
The more that you become conscious, the more challenging that becomes for so many reasons, so many. One of them is just the simple day-to-day decision making. You start to see into what's the long-term result of that behavior. If that's something you've been doing for a very long time, then it causes this, you know, oh, well, you know, I have to change that. Well, then you're changing your core. And so that is an issue. You know, you see when people are fudging the truth, we'll call it.
Mm.
And it isn't a matter of judgment. It isn't like you need to get in there and say, well, I think you're lying, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's more a matter of are they seeing that way? Is that what they actually think? Is that what they actually believe? Is that something that they really need to revise? And then you have to let it go, because you're not them.
Yeah.
You have to see it their way. Perception is reality. So, you know, there's that whole thing. And then you see the future, and then you're really like, oh, you know, are we ready? Can we handle this? Is it going to be okay? Are my family people going to be okay? It's a huge challenge.
And can you switch it off? Or do you constantly see, like, in different dimensions, or the future development of things, or is it something you can control?
You can switch it off, but you can't not know. If you already know, you're going to know.
Yeah.
And when you see or hear somebody that you care about, you know, saying something that is totally, you know, you can see where they're going to go with that, and it's not good, then you have to decide, do I say anything? Should I say anything? What do I say? How do I say it? When do I say it? There's all of that. And then, you know, if you're too emotionally involved, you know, and all uptight, then you shouldn't really decide anything until you get to a moment of clarity. And in that moment of clarity, then what you should do comes to you. And so your timing goes off. People are saying, well, what are you going to do? You know, and they're carrying on. And you're like, the answer hasn't come yet.
Yeah.
So that's not what people want to hear.
Yeah.
And so it's really, you know, the consciousness expansion thing is very different. The places where it is really handy have to do with insight into relationships, insight into your own physical self, your body, and what it needs, and you know what kind of signals is it giving you, because healing is something that has to happen minute by minute, and that's how you stay young, healthy, limber, flexible, open, etc. So
and for you, everything started 30 something years ago with the Kundalini awakening.
yeah,
Like unexpected. And then a moment later, you were changed.
yeah.
You were fully conscious and not ready for it.
Well, it doesn't quite happen exactly that way, but that's darn close.
Okay.
You have a full-blown, spontaneous, a full awakening. You can have a partial, but when you have a full awakening, you know something has happened. So you, and there's this, you know, I didn't know anything about Kundalini or had never heard of it. I wasn't into metaphysics, anything. And so, you know, immediately I began having this knowing what my children were thinking, what my partner was thinking. He was, you know, he was really not familiar with any of this either. And I, you know, that has its downside when you know everything your partner is thinking.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I mean, truth is really good, but sometimes we also not hide, you know, in order not to hurt the other person, or, you know, there are sometimes good reasons to not say things, I believe.
that is true. That is so true. And there's a certain, that's where the compassion and the unwillingness to hurt another comes in. So, you know, it's one of those things where it just starts, you know, I started knowing what somebody wanted for dinner. And
That can be handy.
yeah, right. So little things like that. And
Yeah.
then you know, you get into this period. For me, it was a 3-year period of not sleeping, because when consciousness awakens, you are awake. You
Yeah.
don't sleep. And so
Say
you
more
don't,
about that, because that's such an odd thing to even imagine. What does it mean to not sleep for 3 years?
it means that you are, especially if you are like me, you, you're telling yourself, I didn't get any sleep last night. Oh
Yeah.
my God. And and you keep reinforcing the idea that you're tired. You keep reinforcing the thought that you didn't have any sleep. So it took me 3 years to learn to say, I'm going to bed, I'm putting this body into the bed, and when this body gets out of the bed, I am going to be totally rested, centered, calm, and relaxed. And
Mm.
it worked, because when you have Kundalini at your back, then a lot of things work that don't ordinarily work for you
So
in terms of consciousness.
it's just setting an intention.
Right. And as to
Basically.
the question, how does it work? You put your body to bed. After a while, you know, you try not to toss and turn, because if you're sleeping with your spouse or your lover or your partner or whoever, you don't want to disturb them. And
Mm.
so you lay there, but you eventually you realize that you're out of the body, maybe across the room, and you hear your body breathing like it's asleep, but
Mm.
there you are, wide awake, wide awake. And
Okay.
then consciousness, then this is a really important piece. The nature of consciousness is to create reality. And
Yeah.
so if nothing's happening and it's boring, consciousness doesn't create reality elsewhere. And so then you find yourself caught up in this other reality that some of them are pretty fantastic, and they reflect the expansion of consciousness. And I could go on, you know, for a whole hour about that, but suffice it to say that when the alarm goes off, you're looking at the alarm thinking, okay, it's going off in 3 minutes, okay, 2 minutes, okay, 1 minute, oh, there it is. I have to get up. And then that's, you know, you have to have given yourself instructions to awaken fully rested and to let go of all of the
Mm.
things you saw, felt, did, experienced during the night, and yet you're trying to process that. The fatigue is it got to be almost unbearable.
Mm.
And
So you went on trips and adventures and learnings and whatever during the night, and then you wake up in the morning. You have to process that, while
that's
you should be processing the day
that's
while
right.
you sleep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there's a mental, emotional, and spiritual fatigue that is profound. And
Yeah.
then finally you begin to learn to a few things. You have to become utterly silent. So I live in this very silent pool. And then when you get silent, then you discover that telepathy is working, because you live in this pool of peace,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is quiet. And then all of a sudden across this pool comes this ripple. And, you know, that ripple is some information about somebody or something that either you need to know, or people are going to contact you, or people are wondering about something. And so you begin to realize, oh, and so I spent a few years just studying telepathy and how it works and why it works, and etc.
And and
You
when you
just
say
keep on opening.
and when you say silence, are you sitting in meditation then intentionally, or is this just something that happens during the day naturally? You've just become silent in your mind.
Right, right. I do not meditate. I never really did learn to meditate very well. I can do it, and when I do it, you know, and I'm clear and it's the right moment, then there are spectacular results. Um, there are, but to address the thing about silence, um, to say that you live in a place of inner silence means that there's no mind chatter going on, or what do they call it, monkey mind? There's no what would I call it? There's no expectations. There's no judgment. There's just you observing. You're not trying, here's the major thing. You're not trying to make the world conform to what you think it should be or what you were taught it should be. You're just observing. And you're making note of some of those things, and you're seeing how things really work. And what you come to eventually is this deep understanding of the nature of reality. And that's really where you need to be.
Yeah.
Is with that deep understanding. So.
I want that. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I wanted it very badly, after I got to the point where I thought I'm going to go, crazy.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I thought I was going insane, but I wasn't. I was expanding, and there are prices to pay for expansion. Some of those prices were very costly for me.
In terms of relationships, or what kind of prices?
In terms of relationships, in terms of jobs and career path, in terms of knowing the future, in terms of money and choices. I lost everything. I lost everything. And you have to, at some point, rebuild. And that rebuilding is wonderful. And usually you're stumbling badly during that rebuild process, but pretty soon it comes together, and pretty soon you get a sense of this, what would I call it, a path that you had never considered, and that you're moving along that path very well, very smoothly, and even almost effortlessly. And things come as soon as you get on your path, the true path, your true reason for being here. Things begin to happen, doors open. It becomes clear that the nature of reality is such that when you are in that center self, the core self, and you're operating from that core, then you draw things to you. And they are all things that you need or want, or things that you might not even think you're ready for, but you're still pulling it toward you. And it's quite magical in some ways. I hate to use the term magic, but it's quite magical.
And don't you think it's one of those things that life gave you as a gift? Even though you lost everything, but it's those things when we think in hindsight, it's the best thing that could have happened to me, even though I didn't want it or wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, you end up, I think back every so often, it'll be 38 years, or be 40 years this November, when the first signs of it began. In February of 2019, it'll be 40 years that the first explosive expansion of consciousness happened. And I often still, after all this time, I'll think, how did that happen? Why me?
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for it, didn't know about it, wasn't ready, but you get ready. Ready or not, here it comes.
And knowing what you know now, being super conscious, is that something that you decided before you came into this life, maybe?
I think so.
Yeah.
I had quite a few messages. One of them that was most meaningful to me was the observation from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi that I was...
I know him. I do transcendental meditation.
I don't. But
well, I don't do it every day, but don't tell anyone.
Okay. You know what? Every step, every breath is my meditation.
I hope to get there one day.
Yeah. Everything is very, very conscious in many ways, and and it's really wonderful, and it's much easier than, you know, the other way.
Before, yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is the other way is so draining. It's so difficult. It's so unnatural. So it's,
Yeah.
you come away from that tired and fatigued. And so I think to myself, okay, I can't go that way. That isn't me anymore.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
and
what did the Maharishi say? I interrupted you there.
it was a message relayed to me by one of his students. She gave him my book because he had said, nobody gets through Kundalini without a guru. And so
Mm.
she gave him a copy of my book, The Evolving Human. And he read it and he handed it back and he said to her, she was already a master. And I
Mm.
was like, oh, I need that right then, because I was not doing very well. And it
Mm.
was one of those little moments of, oh, really? You think so?
Well,
And
he says we are all enlightened,
yeah,
even though I don't feel like that. But
yeah. Well, enlightenment, true enlightenment, is when you begin turning into light. It's not an intellectual state. And I have been working on that for a while, and I have some photos that are pretty amazing.
Mm.
Yeah, I was showing those about a year ago in one of my presentations. And just the other day, I thought I should put those on the web because that
Yeah.
would be interesting for people to see. Oh, yeah, there's some progress being made here.
Like, and being of light, meaning like you measured that, or because I keep hearing like our DNA, or if we really break it down, we are actually made of light. Or I can't repeat it, but it's something I heard and which I found really interesting. But
That's
how do you mean it that we are
exactly
enlightened?
what I mean.
Okay.
I mean that you begin generating light.
Mm.
And you generate it, and I've been with beings who are made purely of light. And it became clear after a while, you know, long story short, that that's where we are designed to go
Mm-hmm.
if we want to start down that path. And that is something that is very, it's not difficult to do. A couple of things: you need to eat a little less food,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to you need to exercise, because the body has to be in good shape in order to generate light. And then it's part of it is breath work, and the rest is intention.
Mm.
And so you put all that together and you can increase the amount of light you have and the amount of energy moving through the system, and that begins to generate light.
Mm. Have you
I
written
think,
about this in any of your books already?
yeah, in volume 3, Consciousness and Energy, volume 3, I wrote the beginnings of that. I had been doing a fast. I decided I wanted to do this fast, and I started turning into light. And
Mm.
I won't go through the whole thing. The story is in that book, but I learned a lot from that. And I quit the fast 2 days short of the 40 days.
40 days, gosh, okay.
Yeah. and I had, after only 6 days, I had re-triggered Kundalini, and
Mm.
so I was dealing with that again. But what I've learned is that is the path. That is what we're designed to do. We come here to change ourselves at the core.
Mm.
And all the stresses and the lessons and the interactions and the disappointments and the wonderful excitements, all of that changes us.
Mm.
And that's what we're after. And that is really that core change. You need a whole series of those until you come to this place where you have achieved what's called purity. And
Mm.
purity just simply means that you never have a negative, uncreative thought.
Wow.
And in my dealings with some of the very, very advanced beings, I would they would say, just do this. And I would say, but what if? And they would say, just do this. And I would say, well, I think maybe if I just do that, then blah, blah. And they would say, just do this. And that happened over and over. And I got to this point where I realized that they would not engage in the worrying. They would not engage in anything that was not helpful. Their intensity of emotion and thinking bonded together was what made things happen.
Yeah.
And at that point, I thought, oh, that's why they live in the world they live in, because they refuse to entertain anything negative. And then I got a message from one of my quote unquote friends from other places who said that's what purity is. Pure intention.
Yeah.
Pure intention to create, to be of service, to help, to this, that, whatever.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, okay. But I like to argue.
I don't.
Yeah, like, oh, okay, I have some work to do.
Okay, so you mentioned your friends in other places. They started visiting you also after you had your awakening some time later. And they started showing you the future, if I remember correctly.
That's true.
Okay, so I'm trying to lead into the future of money.
Okay, that is an excellent place to start and an excellent place to end, for that matter, because everything is different. By 2021, so many things were different. When I was with them, I was looking at things, and we visited the first 25 years of the 2000s. So it was from 2000. And this was happening in 1980.
Okay, wow.
So we were visiting from 2000 to 2025. Oh my, nothing but chaos, nothing but disintegration. And they said, you have to develop a vision, an idea, a plan, something that you can hang on to. Because if you don't, you're not going to make it. All you're going to see is death and destruction and disintegration.
And by you, they meant you or humanity?
They meant humanity.
Okay.
They were speaking to all of us.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, we can do that. But I was, this was like the second year of Kundalini. I was falling apart. And they're showing me all this stuff, and I'm like, you know, would you guys just leave me alone? I'm trying to get my life on track here.
Yeah.
And they just kept on coming back with more pictures of the future. And the things that changed the most, they always explained why that change happened. What was going on, and the basic, I would say the bottom line for almost all the changes were that we had grown. We had grown spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and we had grown and matured beyond the structures that were currently in place in the 80s.
Yeah.
So by 2025, almost none of those structures were still in place. And that encompassed the religious structures, the social structures and social nets, I guess you would call it. And the, I would say and the financial, certainly the financial and the food, agriculture systems, housing, relationships, everything was different. And I've been a counselor for probably 35 years now, coach, counselor, spiritual director. And what I started just kind of naturally looking for were some proof that they were wrong.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, yeah, they had that all wrong, you know, because I was only looking for maybe 5 or 10 years ahead. But then all of a sudden, everything started to change.
And the wall came down, the Berlin Wall came down. That's something I think they told you before. I'm in Berlin right now, so.
Yeah, yeah. They said the Berlin Wall will come down and you're going to be there in Germany, you know, shortly before that.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, ain't no way. Ain't no way.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in Europe at all. I would never go there. I don't have any reason to go there. So this is what, 1980. And 1989, I have a daughter who's married. She's in the army. She's military intelligence. She's working in Berlin, you know, and Frankfurt, etc. And she's like, oh, brother.
Yeah. Wow.
So I was there.
Evidences happened. So at some point you started believing, I guess.
Yeah, I started looking for signs, and then I started seeing signs. And when I first saw the cryptocurrency, it was probably 10 years ago, maybe.
Well, Bitcoin is just about 10 years old now. Yeah.
Oh, it was when it first came out, and I was electrified. It's like, there's that money. Wow. There it is.
So you were shown a new kind of money way back when?
Digital money. There was no cash. There was no, we didn't even think about money the way that we think about it now. And I remember looking on what I thought were television screens, because we didn't really have personal computers like we do now.
Yeah.
Because that's 40 years ago. And people do with education was done on television, and political stuff was done on television, and I was just trying to get my mind around that. And I did see some amazing technology, just astounding, healing technology, manufacturing technology. At the time I called it chemical technology, but what I realize now is that it was plasma technology. And I saw the education system of the future, the medical system of the future. And when we talk future, we're talking between now and 2050. So that's within our lifetime. And then we went out as far as 2413. And by that time, everything was majorly different. The way that we grouped, all the cities were gone. A lot of people were gone. That caused me a great deal of grief. And there was a different way of handling communications. There was a different way of thinking about what was important in life. Houses were different. 8 or 10 people would live in a big house all together, and they would maintain that, and the kitchen was a greenhouse. We didn't have kitchens like we have now with all the tools and the knives and the equipment and all that, because they didn't cook hardly anything. You just, when you were hungry, you went in the greenhouse and you got something to eat. And a lot of people were eating, I didn't recognize what it was at the time. It was this white, it looked kind of like yogurt. And it was some sort of substance that had all these frequencies embedded in it. And a teaspoon of that was all you needed for nutrition for the entire day.
Wow.
And so people were generally very slim, and everybody was focused on, what would I call it? They were focused on developing consciousness, not, the current focus is getting a job and getting an education and then getting a good job and then getting married. But the currency thing.
Do people still work in that 2,400 something you said? Do people still work? Do we still have money in that time?
They had means of exchange, but the means of exchange, first of all, we didn't have bookkeeping systems anymore. We had record keeping systems. And the records were of your skill set, everything about your childhood, including pictures and voice recordings from the time you were an infant. Everything you had done and learned. Everybody had like a portfolio of information about themselves. And then that was kept in the family. And the families were anywhere from 20 to 2,000 people, with the average being about 200 people. And the families traded people. If this family over here was doing a specialty thing, and this family over here had a kid who wanted to learn that specialty, then they would send that child to that other family kind of as an intern kind of thing. Some families had a bad reputation. You had to be careful. Some had a phenomenal reputation. Each family was very unique. It was really interesting to see the differences in beliefs in daily life practices, although almost everybody worked at something. The family worked as a unit to provide food, clothing, and shelter. There wasn't much transportation. There was something that moved through the air. It was not a car. There were no roads. And most of the forests and the fields had overgrown. It was really it felt like you were in a wilderness. There were walking paths in these big family places where they'd have maybe 3 dozen, houses, and then a couple of community buildings and etc. But you didn't have, your work was to contribute to the family.
Yeah.
And then for that, you got room and board and education and access to technology, which was phenomenal. And the most important thing that you learned as you were coming up the first 12 years was how to survive in Mother Nature. That was the main thing, how to assess. And the programmers, the programmers of the future were programming everything from weather to I'll say to manufacturing programs, to music, to you name it. Anything that we consume today was being created virtually. And that was very interesting to watch. And so I came to the conclusion that the future was going to be very different in terms of priorities and in terms of who was important in the society, because it was clear that the programmers were key. Absolutely key. Yeah, and they were working on phenomenal kinds of technologies and just amazing things.
It's very interesting. It sounds like in one way we're going back to the past in the way we live, like in communities and really basic. On the other hand, we have all of this technology, and it sounds like we are just removing all of the distraction of having to make a living, so we can fully concentrate on our growth and our evolution, or whatever we come into this life for, expand our consciousness, whatever.
That's really a good way to put it. I hadn't thought of it that way, removing all the distractions, because everybody was focused on, first of all, the raising of the children. Second of all, stabilizing whatever they needed to have for food, etc. Even though they had this amazing food technology, they were still very... a lot of effort went into, let's digress to agriculture for just a moment. A lot of energy went into treating seeds and plants of various kinds with very advanced and very powerful energies. These were plasma energies.
Mm-hmm.
And that food then had a different characteristic to it than the food we have today.
Mm-hmm.
And then that food, the energies, so there was this working relationship with Mother Nature. Okay, Mother Nature, we're going to treat these seeds and then we'll see what you do with it. And so then the plant would come up and the food would be produced, and then they would blueprint that the energy matrix of that food, and they would copy that, and then they would put that into this creamy stuff like
Mm-hmm.
yogurt. And so there was very active, and people had quote unquote real food as kind of a treat.
And high frequency food that then also, I guess, supports your body in supporting your consciousness.
That's right. That's right. Yes. And so the whole agricultural thing was, if your family wasn't producing food, you were going to be hungry.
Mm-hmm.
There was no big agricultural sector the way that we do it today.
Yeah.
And a lot of that actually had faded by 2040 and 2050. I didn't see any of that. You were raising food. A lot of it was indoors because the weather was not good and couldn't be trusted. Most of all, it couldn't be trusted because there were people messing with it. But that they needed to do that in order to learn how to manage that weather. You have to learn as a civilization how to manage the environment. That's atmosphere, electricity, water, and other things,
Mm-hmm.
minerals, because space is full of other minerals that we haven't discovered yet. And in order for us to become a space-based civilization, that's a necessary stage. So we're in that right now. And there are people who are unscrupulous, who are messing with a lot of things, but they're learning a lot. And it's too bad that they are unscrupulous, but at the same time, you know, if we can get through it without doing ourselves in too much, we'll be okay.
Yeah. And it sounds like intention will become not more important, but we will become better at creating through intention.
That's
and
right.
At the same time, we have the technology also that helps us create better conditions.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And let me go back to cryptos for just a moment. The moving of money from this physical stuff to this digital stuff, to virtual money, it's really an important step, because we have to begin to assess what's really of value.
Mm-hmm.
What is really of value? And that move from gold and silver to dollars to cryptos is part of that evolution of our thinking about what's really of value. And we can't just cut off the money, because we have this whole planet full of people who have now been taught to think that money is their survival.
Yeah.
They don't know how to operate in Mother Nature anymore. They don't know how to grow food. They don't know how to process food. They don't know how to preserve food.
Yeah.
And some people would rather die than have to kill and dress an animal. They just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so the move to digital, that's a really important phase. And it's a phase that shifts all of the power. And that power shift is what's really important.
Yeah.
And when I was thinking of, before we got online, and I was kind of excited about the whole conversation, I thought, there's one thing that I really want to get across, and that is that the powers that be, current powers that be, have had control over a lot of stuff that is a lot of gold and a lot of silver, and then a lot of dollars. And they want control over the cryptos, but they don't have it yet. And I don't think they're going to get it. That's the hard part for them. And by choosing crypto, you choose to end the old system.
Yeah.
You choose to get out of that. And I think that that's going to be a necessary and important choice for us. There is a learning curve, and there's all kinds of infrastructure that is not in place. And by the time we get the infrastructure in place, we're going to be moving past, money altogether. But we still have another 25 or 30 years of fiddling with some means of exchange. And it's only as the population goes down, which it does eventually go down. We've finally come to this nice balance point, but as it goes down, the issue of money goes down. And I never quite have been able to get my mind around what actually happens there. The only thing I've been able to come up with, and I've come to this several times and thought, is this right? Is that as the population drops, people somehow end up thinking it's not money that's important, it's people that are important. And we're losing people, and we have more money than we know what to do with, but we don't have enough people to do stuff. And that changes our perception. And so the nurturing of people, a lot of people can't have babies. They're not healthy enough over the next 25 years.
Wow.
So it's there's changes.
Yeah. So I also feel that cryptocurrencies are just a phase. I believe one day we have no money anymore, but I also believe we need this phase, like you said, because we are still wired in a certain way.
That's right.
But you're saying this will be as soon as like 2050 that we start to use less money or phase out money?
Yeah, 2050.
So that's soon. That's in 25, in 30 years. Yeah.
30 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's some ups and downs in that. And I have some gaps, I kind of have looked at it and thought, I should go and look at 2200.
Yeah, I was going to say, why don't you just go and check?
Yeah, because, you go and you look and you see, and then you have to have time to do that and time to put the world aside. And I have just been so busy that I'm running from morning to night and dealing with people from morning to night. And every so often I think, I'm going to go look and see blah, 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 blah. And then, 2 more years go by and I think, okay, I'm going to go do, so I don't do it. But once in a while, when I get really curious about something, I will begin to see pieces that begin to come in. And I begin to collect those pieces.
Yeah. And you also mentioned in one of the interviews I watched, I think you described the future like this, that it can go in all sorts of directions.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you know that whatever future you have seen is the one we're going to? What if you've been here and we are going there?
Very good. Excellent question. You don't know. And here's the thing, this comes back to what the little man in brown robes kept saying over and over and over. You are creating the future. Here's here's the possibility. We can show you what you could create, but if you don't create it, it isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And they kept harping is not the right word, but bringing up this fact that the reality is much more dynamic. And, here in the hand, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 possible paths. They had 500 possible paths. And when you begin to understand the scientific principle of superposition, in superposition, the definition is that everything exists in all possible states. So what's to prevent us from kind of taking a detour over into another reality zone?
Mm-hmm.
What's to prevent it's so dynamic. And what you choose minute by minute is very important. and
Mm.
and so, to answer your question about how can we know, that comes down to, you have to know what you want. You have to be firm and clear about what the outcome of that is. You have to be willing to look at the stages you have to go through in order to get there. And then you have to be willing to walk that path and make those choices, even if they're difficult choices. And you'll get there. You'll create it. And it's that simple, and it's very powerful.
Yeah.
And most people are not there. They are like I was back in 1979 and 78 and etc. They think that it just happens. I'm a victim.
Mm.
Just coming at me. I don't have any power. I don't have any control.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
Yeah. And that's what we hear from everybody, even from scientists now. So yeah, but we need to keep hearing it in all sorts of languages.
Yes.
I'm listening to Bruce Lipton. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. I love him. Joe Dispenza, and they are all saying the same thing. Like you, everybody's saying the same thing, but in different ways. And we need different people in different languages speaking to us,
right,
until we get the message.
That is so true, because something that Bruce says, somebody else is going to get, and something that I say, somebody's going to go, oh, that's what that means.
Yeah.
And somebody else is going to hear another person, and it'll sink in. So it has to be said in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and as long as we have still chaos in the world, obviously we haven't gotten the message. So
that's true. Obviously. Yeah.
Okay.
Gosh.
Oh, there's so many things. Also related to cryptocurrency is, of course, the topic of decentralization, which is also what you already mentioned when you talked about the redistribution of power.
That's right.
And I see this in many different areas. I only became aware of it once I got involved with Bitcoin, and I heard the term decentralization for the first time. But then I realized like even Brexit and the EU, is now a symptom of decentralization to me. And in the beginning, I was like, oh my God, why? And now I'm like, maybe it's natural evolution of society, humanity, or maybe there's even, well, in the beginning, I couldn't see anything good about it. And now I'm like, maybe this is a good thing. So, of course, I also don't understand everything about politics. So,
I'll tell you what, it's the politics subject is pretty, people get really passionate about that. And a lot of people are just really looking at a tiny piece, and they're defending that piece for all they're worth. And I'm like, what about the big picture?
Yeah.
And the big picture is what the robes said. And every so often I think about what is happening here in the US and the effort to, quote unquote, make America great again, which I love. And I also know that you can't go back. We can make America greater than it was before, but we can't go back to making it great the way it was in the past. And the rest of the robe said, you're moving past nations. You're moving past that. And that's the whole effort that is, that's at the core of Trump's work. And so I've come to this place of, okay, I don't think we can continue with nations, because it's an artificial separation between the hearts and minds of people. Everybody, I would love to be in communication and contact with people in Russia and people in China and people, and I actually am in communication with a lot of people in almost every continent around the world, because I have clients around the world. And so I hear firsthand And yet, if I were to write a letter to, say, Vladimir Putin, I would be immediately suspect. You can't do that. That's against the national rules.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. I don't like having certain people set off as untouchable. And so that's something that it's a nuisance. It's just a nuisance. So
and borders are also so weird. Sometimes when I just float up and I look, I'm like, whoever invented borders?
Right. When you look at a globe of the world, it's like, I don't see any borders in there.
And I'm always like, do other planets do that?
Very good. Yeah, so we're moving past nations, and what replaces that is this die-off of population, because people have been spoon-fed by nations, by national governments, who spoon-feed those people in order to get their votes and their cooperation and their support and their what do you call that? The results of their work. Capitalism shovels money up the mountain to the person at the top. And that just it can't continue.
Yeah.
You can't have this huge disparity between people who are hungry and people who have an ungodly, unrealistic amount of money. You know, I often want to say to Bill Gates, what is the matter with you hogging all that money? What are you thinking? You know, there's people that are hungry. Do something. And he doesn't see that, or somebody. I don't know. I don't want to pick on Gates, but sometimes I'd like to pick on those really, really wealthy people and say, look, open up. Open up. We have a future, a fabulous potential that's designed into the human body. Why don't we develop that instead of trying to cut off the people at the bottom that you describe as useless eaters? I don't go for that. Develop everybody, because when you develop the consciousness, you begin to create a state of balance and a state of health and common sense.
And that is also why I believe blockchain technology that underlies Bitcoin and all of these cryptocurrencies this technology is a result of a new consciousness, because it facilitates this even distribution. And yes, there will still be rich people, but when the rich get richer, the poor get richer too in this new system. And in our current system, it's profit for a few and well-being for all. This is how I always think of the difference between the old and the new paradigm.
Very nice. Very nice.
So that's why recently somebody said again, Bitcoin is a pyramid scheme. And
oh, wow. They don't get it. Yeah.
Still so much education to do.
I think the first time it really hit me, the power of blockchain, I was reading some analyst's work, and he just laid it right out there. He said, you know, this blockchain has the power to hold all of the details of every transaction, and that's going to make it unnecessary for the government to have all these records that they keep in all these offices. So here in America, we have property taxes we have to pay. We have to pay on the fact that we own a house, or we own a boat, or we own an airplane, or we own a car. There's all kinds of fees associated with ownership. And the only way that they're able to track that ownership is because the capitalist system has created this system of records and offices that, you know, people, if you want to drive a car, you could drive one maybe for a little while without the driver's license and without the tags, the registration and the license plate on the back of the car or the front. But somebody's gonna see that, some official is gonna notice that you don't have a license plate on your car sooner or later, and you're gonna get a ticket, and that is going to be their price exacted It's they're trying to get money out of
Yeah.
people all the time.
But also this whole system costs so much money.
Yeah,
I mean, most of the people in, I think, any country, in any population, are working as these record keepers.
that's right.
And when blockchain takes over, of course, many people are scared to understand a little bit or have learned a little bit about blockchain. Decentralization means that all these jobs will disappear. So many people will lose their jobs. And I'm like, yay! We don't need to spend our life in the 9-to-5 rat race anymore. And there will be, the blockchain on the other hand, of course, brings many opportunities for extra and different income.
Yeah.
There's so many things. Yeah, I'm working with an organization now who wants to raise consciousness in the world by getting more people to meditate. And they will build an app on the blockchain which pays people for meditation.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
And in the same way, so many things will be tokenized and will be rewarded for little things that we are doing for free right now, that are just part of our day, like
That's
posting on Facebook or something. We create content on Facebook. Why aren't we getting paid for that?
That's
Why
right.
are only certain people here? So anyway, so I'm not worried about all of us losing our jobs, because we will have a replacement for that income. And of course it has to come, but it will come, I'm very certain. Well, you have been to the future, you know more about this than I do, probably, hopefully.
Well, we're headed into a time when and I think it's pretty close now, actually. I've been a little more worried about what's going to go on in Europe than I have in the US. There's this period of chaos we're in it right now, but between 2015 and 2021, and it reaches its most intense point in 2018, 19, 20.
Yeah.
And by 2021, the money system is not there. The money, and I've seen that over and over, and I keep thinking, can't we have a dual system to kind of, go
but
through?
isn't that the dual system? Isn't Bitcoin, I mean, this is the reason I'm expecting the next financial crisis any day now.
I am too.
Yes,
Yeah.
and many people do. So this is why I bought Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's the only reason that I thought, okay, I don't know whether this new system wins or whether the old system stays on. I just want to have money in both places. So
that's right.
I don't need to care which one will win. I hope we will go towards decentralization, but how can I possibly know? So that was my reason, that was my way to bring a part of my money to safety, basically, and get prepared. So what do you know about this?
Yeah, ditto. I have told clients, it's about gold, silver, land, jewelry or jewels or precious stones.
Yeah.
Some art or sculpture that's valuable, and your cryptos.
Yeah.
Period. That's it. That is the whole fiat system is just not looking very good. And
and it has a lifespan. Every fiat currency has a lifespan, and I think we are way
overdue. Yeah.
With the euro, not yet so much. The dollar, yes.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I think the next financial crisis, it will just, there will be no mercy for any currency. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's already blowing up. Nobody is talking about it. I think people have been kind of like, are we good? Are we?
But we see Venezuela, what's happening there, and how there's a cryptocurrency called Dash that is saving, really life-saving for people right now. So, and who knows, maybe this is just a small example for the whole world in a couple of years. Who knows?
I know. I look at the cryptos, and I remember way back when hearing about, I think it was, I called it dog coin. but I think it was Dogecoin.
Dogecoin, yeah.
And I was, at the time, I was like, you know, the story was that somebody started it as a joke,
Yeah.
and it took off. And I thought, oh, look at that, even Dogecoin is doing okay.
Yeah, and then there were crypto kitties, and so all the dogs and cats are on the blockchain.
Yeah, yeah. And I think as we build out the infrastructure for exchange,
Yeah.
that's a critical piece, a very critical piece. And I am so excited about that. And I'm kind of watching, thinking, come on, keep going.
Yeah, it's important because that's where the old system and the new system clash, and the old system still has power
That's true.
to cut off the channels how we can exchange. And that's why also I think next year will be really the year of the decentralized exchange. Well, hopefully it will be.
Yeah.
But you mentioned somewhere, so you mentioned that you bought Bitcoin, and you also mentioned that only a few of them will make it. Everybody, I think, knows that or thinks that way, but which ones? Which are the cryptocurrencies that are going to make it?
Well, here's some things that I have seen or read or, you know, got some pretty good information about. But the things I've seen is that if you don't want to make any mistakes, you don't want to take any risk, then Bitcoin Cash, and Litecoin are really it.
Yeah.
Now, Ethereum has some potential, but right now it has a ton of problems.
Yeah.
And it has been used for some pretty ugly things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to come out. And I think that that's going to affect what Ethereum does.
Oh.
Ethereum Classic may do okay. So, you know, Bitcoin Cash, and Litecoin are like the 3 stars, you know, in the sky.
But that's something that you have.
That's what I've seen.
You've seen this.
Yeah.
With your consciousness.
Right.
Okay.
So then what I've seen in terms of other coins is that they're kind of up and down and around. Some of there's a couple that I have seen that just keep coming back up to the top. Veritasium is one of them. And there's another one, I forget what that other one is. And then there's a few that I have seen that are mediocre, but you don't lose. You don't lose, but they're only mediocre.
That's when you buy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they never get above mediocre. And those, you know, the ones that are really mediocre are really Ethereum.
Yeah.
Which goes against everything.
I buy, or like the ones that I invest in is based on a lot of research, but also on a feeling, on intuition, and you know.
Yeah.
And Ethereum gives me nothing. I have no.
Okay.
I have one Ether that I bought last year when it was, I don't know, $15 or $20. So and I'm keeping that, so I can't go into minus on that anymore. But it's just, and no matter how many good things people will say about it, I just have no relationship with. I don't know.
Very good.
And
it has been used.
Dash, on the other hand, that I'm super connected, feel super connected to.
Yeah, Dash and Digibyte both do pretty well. There's let's see, what else is there. I think it's Kron or Kron is one of them.
Okay.
Or maybe it's Tron.
That rings a bell, yeah.
Yeah, that one does not do well.
Yeah, there was a big hype, and then, everything went down since.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Since December, I haven't tried it. Yeah, it's good. It's good not to check. If you have any don't look right now.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, you know, if you want to, and here's the other thing. I'm not in it for trading purposes. Yeah. I'm in it for security purposes.
Yeah, me too.
And I wanted also, I have told my family, and they're not listening very well, but I've said to them, get into the cryptos now, because there's this long learning curve
Yeah.
as to how to handle it. And yes, you can't do a whole lot with it in terms of buying, but you can do some things.
Yeah.
And the infrastructure is coming.
Yeah.
And we may have some difficulties with the internet in 2019 and 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And that will affect what happens with the cryptos, etc. But overall, if we get through that period, then it's pretty clear sailing after that. So, and the little man in brown robe said, if your internet goes down, bring it back up. Bring it back up. It's the symbol of the global brain.
How can the internet go? I mean, what happens if the internet goes down?
If the internet goes down, we're on our own.
Yeah.
You have to, and so I've said to people, have some skills, know how to grow food, know how to process food, know how to make some clothes, know how to fix an engine or get some kind of, alternative power going, know how to repair a house, know how to whatever, all of the basic skills. And with that, and we have some really hard lessons around that. And that is why when I have gotten into the future, people teach their children first how to survive.
Yeah.
It's not about reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's about gardening, growing, and how to make sure you have a roof over your bed or over your computer. If you don't have
It's
that,
difficult in a city.
And they said to me at one point, and I was like, no. They said, learning not to build these huge cities will be one of the hardest lessons of your time period, your civilization.
Yeah.
And I love some of those big cities.
I'm not a fan, so I won't miss them.
Okay. I love them. They're so full. My grandma would say they're so full of piss and vinegar. So, you can find anything going on in those cities. Art, music, dance, theater, so many things.
It's true, but at the same time, there's so much loneliness in especially big cities because of the distance and because of all the options. The more options you have, the more distracted you become, and the more non-committed you become, because there's so much to do, and that also reflects on your relationships, on your friendships. And it's something, I've moved to Berlin 4 years ago, and it's something that I'm really noticing. And I'm like, I want to move to a smaller place, but then I'm going to miss the international life. And exactly. I don't know yet.
I know, I do know. I've had some of those same difficulties. I'm out here on a farm in the middle of cornfields and grape vineyards.
Yeah.
And I love going to the city. I get cabin fever, and I say, I have to go to town. And town is 30 miles away, and it's got some spice to it.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine what we're going to do without those cities. And
I do think that this community style living that we're moving towards from the sounds of it, will not happen in cities.
I cannot count. I was going to go back and dig out all the emails I've gotten, just thousands of emails from people that have said, after they read or heard me talk about the book or read Robes, they have said, oh my gosh, I've been having these visions that we have to move into these smaller communities. We have to get more connected. We have to be more sustainable. And I think, okay, be careful. Everything is, especially with the, what do they call that? 21, Agenda 21. That's all about sustainability. But when you dig into that, it's not about sustainability at all. That's just the buzzword. And it's really about control. And
I haven't
so,
heard that yet. Agenda. Is that an American, US thing?
oh my
What
gosh,
was
that gets thrown at us over and over. And oh, Donald Trump didn't sign or took us out of Agenda 21. It's a plan to take over the world. It's very popular in some places, especially among those who think, I'll say it this way, it's very popular among those who are very naive,
Mm-hmm.
who haven't really read in between the lines or even read the document
Mm.
and looked at what are they saying here? What would have to be in place for this to happen?
Okay.
That is something that I think is we're gonna have to look at, is this real sustainability or is this part of the New World Order, con
Mm.
job?
Mm.
If it's part of the con job, that's right now, that whole struggle is just reaching a fever pitch.
Mm.
And that's why I am more worried about Europe than I am about America, because the European financial system is really been the heart of much of the Western financial system. And the dollar is actually based in many things that happen in Switzerland and the Bank of International Settlements.
Mm.
And that is getting ready to blow up. And that's going to affect the euro. It's going to affect it's going to affect Belgium big time. And we're right on the doorstep of that. So back to sustainability. Yes, we do need to be truly sustainable. And that doesn't mean that we get moved en masse into cities of 2 million people where we all have 300 square feet to our name and get fed whatever they want to feed us, and it's all very controlled.
Yeah.
That just is not going to work.
Yeah.
So
many things to understand how they are all connected. It's just, it's too big.
Yeah, you have to spend a lot of time reading and listening and watching, and you see through a lot of the stories. That's one of the problems of intuition, is you begin to see the connections that are being made and the things that are being omitted. And when somebody makes this announcement, it really means that, that it's worrisome.
Yeah, and that also takes a new consciousness, or us being more conscious to be able to see that and read between the lines.
Yeah, that's true.
So we all need to become more conscious.
Yeah.
I heard you say, and I know, and many people know. How do we do that? Do you have a tip for us for a fast track to higher consciousness?
How do we do that? Well, so let me say this. I teach it, and I've been teaching it for 38 years. I know that once you start on that journey, it's something that you can't quit, you can't stop. The journey into the self is the most fascinating journey ever. And people get very scared of their own power. I set up these various experiences, and I do it in a way that people don't realize what they're actually doing until I tell them what they did afterwards. And then they're like, oh, oh my God. And then they're confronted with power. Everybody wants power and everybody's terrified of it. What does that mean? And I understand, because when I first was confronting that, and the power to see, the power to hear, anywhere in space and time, the power to know, what should I do with that? And the answer is nothing. Sit down, shut up, and watch. And that was a hard lesson for me. I thought I had to rescue the world or save the world. And that was an embarrassing kind of lesson, and very, very important at the same time.
Yeah.
And and so I've developed a set of classes, and actually I'm just getting ready to upload the first one, Intuition 1, online. And it's a process that you go through. And if somebody is kind of, I'll put it this way, if someone makes the time and the space to open up to themselves and their skills, and somebody else comes in and says, just try this, see what happens. And what you learn is how amazingly unique, how powerful you are, what your own gifts are, because everybody's gifts are a little bit different.
Yeah.
And then I encourage people to go out and use them so that they can make enough mistakes to go, oh, whoops.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I shouldn't have done that. And a lot of times it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's just perfect. But it's a long process. It takes about a year to go through all 7 classes. And I make people take a break in the middle of that, because you have to catch up with yourself.
Yeah.
And then and so you learn to, first of all, you learn how your equipment works. If you, and it's amazing what people don't know.
Yeah.
So, you know, the first class is learning how that whole brain and consciousness system works and what you can do with it. And some of that is just downright fascinating. And then you practice clairvoyance, and then almost everybody runs right smack into their body, because what you realize as you begin to develop the self is that your body is your equipment, and you have to keep it in good working order.
I think that's the biggest lesson for most of us, including myself right now, because we've been so like spiritual and mind, and like spirit and mind, we're fascinated with that. And I think many people forget how important the body is for that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And then we go through dreams. We spend a whole section on dreams and what dreams are and how that works. And that's fascinating. And then we have a whole section on multidimensionality, and then a whole section on power, and then a whole section on higher consciousness, which is, you could call it Buddha consciousness or Christ consciousness or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
and so you can learn clairvoyance, and you can learn to awaken.
Yeah.
It can be taught. You don't have to have a Kundalini awakening.
No, you don't. You don't. It's a matter of practicing, and then you develop some trust in yourself.
Yeah.
And then you have to learn the language, and it's a language of energy. So once you learn that language, you can see almost anything.
Wow.
And then and you can interpret the languages that you do see, or the things that you do see. And then there's little things that come along. Like yesterday, I got a letter from someone, I think a programmer, a woman who is a programmer, and she was describing that she had I think gone on a bike ride, and she came home and she was laying on the sofa, and she said, all of a sudden I was still on the bike and I was on the sofa. I was in 2 places at one time. How could that be? And then she was seeing through her own eyelids. And I said, yeah, that happens all the time. And she could see 2 different worlds at one time. And she just was an amazing, I don't think she realizes how good she is already.
Yeah. And she's a student of yours or client of yours.
Yeah. And so I said to her, she said, I'm looking at my boyfriend sitting on the end of the sofa, and he's doing something, and I'm seeing him through my eyelids as well, and he's doing something else. And I said to her, that's being in 2 different worlds. That is superposition right there. That is multidimensional experience, hands-on, right there in your own lap. And she was, I'm not sure she got it, but it'll sink in over time.
Yeah.
So we have skills.
And I guess a result of this course or these learnings is also that we can create with more intention and create our reality, right? That's
right.
the end result, I guess.
Yeah. I say to people when they first come into class, I'm after your power for you, because I want you to come to this place where you'll say, because I said so. And you don't even blink at your own power. And to do that, you have to trust your love. You have to trust what you see. You have to trust what you know. And you have to trust that your insistence is going to lead to something good.
Yeah.
And that is when you can come to a place of power. And then you learn how to marry thought and emotion. Very, very important to do that, because if you're just going to sit on your cushion and think these fine thoughts about what you want to happen, nothing is going to happen.
Yeah.
Nothing.
So there are uncreative thoughts.
Well, there's thoughts with no power behind them.
Yeah.
You have to have some emotion behind them.
Yeah.
So I tell people, hang on to your anger, because you want to be able to use a little bit of that anger with a thought that you care about deeply. And when you put those two together, something happens. So you don't want
I have a lot to learn, because I would think, but that's a negative emotion. I'm going to create something negative.
Nope. All emotions are useful when you know how to use them.
Okay.
They're important. Otherwise, it's like my friend Alvy says, you just become a doormat.
Yeah. Well, that's what we are before we learn how to create a universal doormat. Or we think we are.
A universal. I like that. All right. Good.
You can never have enough consciousness, right?
Yeah, that's true. No, that actually the fact of the matter is you are consciousness.
Yes.
Everything is consciousness.
Yes.
So every hair has its own little world and its own mindset. Yeah.
Maybe I can convince my gray ones to change their color again.
I like that.
If I have the power, I have the power, right?
Yeah, right. Very good.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I will